See, can we determine if we have a quorum, please? We do. We're ready to go. I'm going to jump to board comments first, the last item. I'm sorry? Okay. Can we do a roll call, please? Thank you.
Present. Present. Here.
Here.
Present. So the notice of this meeting was properly posted on April 22, and we'll begin. I want to move to board comments, and we'll come back to them later. Friday, I spoke to Larry Stevens, who will be resigning from our oversight and moving to Nevada, Missouri as an interim city manager. I would like to make a motion to accept Mr. Stevens' resignation with regret.
I'll move the motion.
I have a second. Is there any discussion?
I second.
Okay, we won't put it on the agenda.
Okay. I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay. There's no motion. We've noted Mr. Stevens has resigned. I will forward this email to Stacy that can forward to the 3 county commissioners. He was appointed at large. It'll be up to the 3 county commissioners to pick a replacement. Mr. Stevens has recommended Guy Henson, the former city manager of Midwest City, who he says is wonderful. Thank you. We have some minutes of February 27th to consider. Is there a motion?
Second.
I have a second. Is there any discussion? Cassie, can we have a vote?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, motion passes. So, Stacy, where do you want to begin on this agenda? Probably number 3. All right, we'll begin there with possible discussion and possible action on the status from HOK regarding the new facility.
On your agenda, you have about 3 items in a row that are related, but we kind of broke them apart. The schematic design includes everything, but then we pulled out the interiors and the architecture because you really haven't seen that yet. So while it kind of all goes together, there is 3 different agenda items in a row here that we can have discussions or whatever on. HOK is going to give you an overview of all of it. And there's probably about 500 pages of design, so they're not going to go through every single page. They're just going to try to hit the highlights and answer your questions. The key to it is why did they design it the way they did and some things like that. So we'll turn it over to Farouk.
Good afternoon. I am Farouk Kareem with Reese Associates, Associate Architect with HOK. I think what we'll start with is just helping everybody understand some of the design parameters that we use to design the new jail or to start designing the new jail. Certainly no more warehousing of inmates. We wanted more dignified housing. I'm going to stop referring to them as inmates and start calling them residents. I think that's kind of better nomenclature. Having appropriate spaces for family reunification, visitation, both on-site and remote, rehabilitation designed into the housing, better acoustics, natural light. We also want to have mental health facilities, behavioral health facilities, both in and outside of the jail. So we have incarcerated and non-incarcerated beds, which we'll cover here in a moment. We want to emphasize reducing the county's healthcare costs with an improved infirmary, behavioral treatment, and special behavioral health housing within the jail. We want to design a facility that reduces operational operational costs. That's extremely important. Also as important as improving the safety of inmates, the safety of staff, and the safety for the public as well. We also have some on-site criminal court services. So we're trying to reduce the amount of back and forth for detainees going back and forth to this building, the courthouse. Thank you. And so with that, I'm going to jump into a short presentation. And as Stacy mentioned, the schematic design package is, to be exact, 333 pages at the moment. This is a little unusual because it's such a big project and it's such a engineering heavy project. Typically, for a typical project, you would not have a lot of engineering type drawings in schematic design. Usually, it's more narratives, but the engineers in every discipline have really been digging in, especially the mechanical and electrical engineering. I won't go through the full table of contents, but you can see it's a very extensive report. I believe you guys either have gotten or will be getting a copy of the report. And we've, kind of gone department by department. When you look at the report, there are some overall drawings of certainly the site, an overall floor plan, but then each area of the facility is blown up so that you can see in greater detail the preliminary layouts. It's also preceded by the section of the architectural space program for each department. So we'll start with the site, which we're all very familiar with. We believe it's really a very, very good site. We felt it was the best site of all the sites that we evaluated. Again, I'm not going to go into great detail here, but I just wanted everybody to understand the level of detail that we went to. We had 17 criteria that we looked at on each site, looking at things like utility atlases. We felt, and people we spoke to at the city all felt that this was the best, most development-ready site, partly because of the utilities that were here. Looking at different things like electrical access, gas access, those red lines, so you can see there's gas access to our site. Also looking at the developable area so that we do have some flood zones on the site, but we still have plenty of room for both the jail and what we are calling the BCC, the Behavioral Care Center. And overlaid on that, you can see some kind of the floodplain or flood zone in that kind of dashed yellow line. So we're outside of that zone. You can see sort of ghosted in those white lines, the overall footprint and layout of the jail. And then we're also thinking about things like site drainage. We have a big footprint, a big building. We're putting a lot of impervious surface on this site. So starting to think about the fact that we're going to have to deal with a lot of water when it rains. And then vehicular access. We need to think about staff coming to the facility. We need to think about the public coming to the facility. We need to think about residents coming and going to and from court or being brought to the jail, which happens off of 22nd at the back of the site. And then, of course, the behavioral care access on the south side of the site as well. As I mentioned, we have a pretty well-developed overall plan. And again, as I mentioned, we're not going to go into the blow-up detail, but you can see all of these different colored areas. I'm going to try and do this. Some of the colors are a little close to the same, but so if you start on the right-hand side, the yellow is the public entrance. It's a 2-story volume space. The blue is the staff entrance and staff spaces with secure staff parking just kind of to the upper right. Inmate services is the orange area below the yellow block, and so that would be where visitation takes place. That's where the courtrooms are. We do have 2 shelled out courtrooms for the future, as well as the 2 that are in the current planning. Once you go beyond the yellow, you have some different shades of brown. So at the top, that is medium security with the central utility plant all the way on the far left-hand side in kind of the gray color. In the middle zone, you have the maximum security in the darker brownish color. The purple areas around the pink are the incarcerated behavioral beds. The green space in the middle, the kind of bright green, is actually a courtyard. So again, we're trying everywhere we can to get as much natural light into the housing pods and housing units as we can. The kind of lighter tan in the lower right-hand corner is standard housing for minimum security and dormitory housing. Then we also have the infirmary in the pink area, and then we have some back of house areas at the bottom for food service, deliveries, warehouse, laundry. The intake area is in the lower left-hand corner in the red, and then the behavioral care center is attached. You can see in that purple zone down at the bottom. So it's got a really good flow, a really good layout. It's been really encouraging, and I'll be honest, a little fun to see the staff from the jail in the meetings, just looking at these spaces and seeing what's possible compared to what they're used to dealing with every day. So that's very encouraging, and they have been a big part of the discussions, both for what we're going to talk about next, as well as the planning of the facility. So this is just a summary sheet of the space program, and I can't remember off the top of my head how many pages this document is, but it goes department by department. And we try to take into account every single space and the size of those spaces that we're going to have and need. One of the questions that I'm sure lots of people will be interested in is the number of beds. Right now, we are sitting just below 2,400 beds. And so how did we get to that number? So through lots of discussions with the county, with jail staff, and looking at the size of Oklahoma County, comparing Oklahoma County to other similar sized counties, looking at the growth in Oklahoma City and Oklahoma County, we kind of came into a number just under 1,900 beds. In jail design, the accepted practice is that you provide about 15% flex beds or growth beds over and above the number you think you're going to need. And it's really not just for growth. There are a lot of times where you have to separate inmates out for various reasons. So just to operate the jail, keep people safe, make it flexible and functional, you really need those 15% beds. So that's how we got to that number of 2328. The team has also, sure. So I think the current jail was designed for just under 1,400 beds. And we know that there have been times when the jail was beyond that capacity. It's certainly below that capacity now. One of the things that we discussed a lot was just, it's hard to know what we're going to be faced with in the future. Laws could change, policies could change. And so we wanted to give the county enough flexibility to kind of adjust and flow as those things happen over time. But again, it's just looking at historical jail population numbers, looking at the size of the jail we currently have, and we're just trying our best guess to plan for the future. And one thing I didn't mention, I'll go back for a second to the overall plan. It's not going back. There we go. We do have some expansion area on the site to the north end of the site. So when you look at your package, you'll see some dashed in areas on the north side of the site. It's taking a minute to get there. There we go. So we are planning for at least 600 beds in the future, if that's necessary.
Farouk, um, this is a significantly higher number than I recall HOK coming up with when it did its study for CJAC.
Mhm.
How did we get from, I think it was about 1,800 beds to the nearly 2,400 that we have today in that?
I can't really speak to that first study. Really, this this number, like I said, was really developed through those programming sessions and talking with Brandy and her team and her staff, as well as county officials. I mean, that was just kind of the number that we felt like once we started looking at really some statistics and data from other counties across the country. Nashville was one that we certainly looked at because they're similar in size, and that was one of the facilities that we went and looked at. So I know that's not as detailed as probably you're looking for, but that's kind of what I recall. So
What's the capacity of the Nashville facility?
well, that one's a difficult one to quantify in comparison to this because it is one of 3 or 4 facilities that they have. So I'm trying to remember. I think that facility is right around 700 beds. That new facility. So
Do we know what the overall capacity is?
their overall capacity is greater than ours.
Could you also? I mean, I think you kind of talked about this, and I know we kind of buried the lead because we have a series of discussions, including cost. So could you speak a little bit about more about I guess I'm going to say the modular sort of approach to the design here. I mean,
Sure.
you have the future expansion, but
Sure.
could you how much could that same approach be looked at for what's existing to figure out? I mean, how many pods, if you will, once we do get the cost? What's sort of a minimum viable, I guess, design when it comes to the number of pods that you would be able to add in the future versus now, if we can't afford 2,400 beds.
Well, I think the general consensus was we don't want to provide the same number of beds we have today because, again, we know that we've been, well above that number. So just trying to find that right size. Each housing unit within a pod holds 56 to 58 inmates. So that sort of is the building block that we're working with. And those go together in groups of 4. So certainly, we could pare those back or scale those back, as we look at the costs and make some tough decisions. So
But I get so with the design that we have, I mean, also just going back to some of the earlier discussions about the benefits of this sort of 2-story kind of max layout versus maybe higher rise, construction, things like that. I guess in my mind, one of the benefits though seems to be that you can sort of anticipate additions a
absolutely.
lot more easily,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think the only issue there that we talked about is, again, you have to make some calculated judgments with respect to expansion. So what we really want to do is so you have a little bit of expansion built into what you build. That's the first goal. And then the next goal is to plan for some expansion so that red area, that, the intake, the food service, all of that back of house support can support the next phase of expansion. And then when you do a major expansion, you'd have to address additional infrastructure and support services. But that would be the approach. So hopefully I answered your question. What else?
Well, I think the question Sandino asked was where I was going with the current construction escalating factors that you have, even before you start building and why you continue to build. Can we basically work within the amount of money we have based on this number that you determine we should have? And so how do you address that? Because construction costs are going up.
Right.
And so, do we build to this max or try to build to the max with the fact that you've got costs that maybe even exceeding where we are today?
Right.
And so do we scale down first and then attempt to scale up if more funds are available? I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out.
Well, I think that's why this process is important, and I think that's why we have a great construction manager partner. They're going to help us through that. I know that they're going to talk in much greater detail about the costs, and they will talk about escalation factors that they've planned in. One of the things that, again, is a little different about this project is that because it's so big, this is a 3-year long construction project. It's going to take a while to build this, and so we're planning for some escalation even through that construction process. And again, I don't want to speak for the Flintco guys, but they certainly will cover that. I think that the general consensus is that we don't have the funds to really build even sort of the minimum of what we need today. So I think we need to have some discussions with you guys and certainly with the county about what that number is or might be. I think this is the number that everybody feels comfortable that we need, but is that the minimum that we can build today? I don't know the answer to that today.
Farouk, I don't know if you're the right guy to answer this question, but I'm pretty sure I read in the document that the county recommended 50% maximum security. My question is that normal, or is that on a par with other facilities
Sure.
of our size and type around the country? So it seemed like a significant number.
Well, when you think about it, it makes sense. So the majority of the beds that we have are maximum and medium security. And part of that is because of all these great diversion programs that we have in the community. So you don't have as much minimum security or a dormitory style housing because we're trying to divert those individuals out into programs. And so as a result, I think it's sort of a false negative because people look at it and go,
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks.
What else? We can go through the rest of this fairly quickly unless anybody has questions, but I wanted to give you a little bit of context. The team has certainly been very mindful of where this facility is at, meaning in Oklahoma City, thinking about just, materials and styles. We are getting into some architectural design. We're not really going to talk a lot about interior design today, but we're doing the same processes on the interiors. We're thinking about what's around us. And I'm not going to, again, go through these in detail, but I wanted you guys to see just the level of detail and the level of research that the team is going to think about just sort of the direction and the basis of design. Lots of thought about health and well-being. The behavioral care center is being designed in such a way that the county can receive Medicare, Medicaid funding. That's really important, and so we're already planning on a facility that will go through the state health department to meet those guidelines. Thinking about the importance of color and natural light and daylight. And again, just thinking about a sense of place and thinking about all of those kind of big building blocks, the different types of spaces that we're going to have, the visitation, courtrooms, offices, all the way down to the detention housing and the behavioral care center. And then just, again, some of the research and building blocks that we're getting ready. Usually we start looking more heavily at the interiors during design development, and that's our next phase to come. Just an example of, some of the blow up areas that we talked about, just so you can kind of get a better deep idea and some more detail in the planning. I know it's kind of hard to read on that overall plan, but all the rooms are laid out. Every single room that's in the program is in the plans. And it's been I think a good tool for Flintco to use as we're kind of going through and getting some very, very preliminary pricing and thoughts and ideas. Already starting to think about the site and the landscaping. So, again, we think this is, while it is a jail, we think it's going to be a great great neighbor in the neighborhood, and it's going to really improve the surrounding area. A couple of quick shots of the exterior of the building. So that main yellow area that I mentioned on the plan is that glassy two-story element. The area to the right is the staff area. The area to the left is inmate services. And you're starting to see on the left-hand side part of the behavioral care center back in the background. The intent and the idea is that we want this facility to be secure. We want it to be dignified. We want it to be warm. We want it to, you know, as much as possible, present a welcoming facade to the community. So, you know, again, lots of daylight, lots of glass. The brownish, reddish brown material that you see is actually a terracotta panel. So, we just thought it would be a good idea to stay away from materials that were used on the previous jail. And also, it's a big building, right? So we're trying to use materials that are of a scale that are really relevant and meaningful to this size of facility. And you can see on that right-hand side, you know, there are some amenity services for the jail staff, like a roof terrace and a break area, and some other facilities like a weight room that they can all use. And we'll just kind of swing around. You can kind of get some idea of what that facility looks like. And again, this is all facing east. Sandino mentioned, you know, the height of the facility. It's all one story. You can see on the far right is actually the housing. And so as we get kind of past this front facade, it all becomes precast and tilt-up concrete. We're still trying to determine some of the final systems that we're going to use. For example, we haven't made a determination on what we're going to use for the cells yet. It could be a precast on site. It could be steel cells. We're still, you know, determining some of those things. This is the entrance to the behavioral care center. So, you know, again, trying to make it as welcoming as possible. It's really meant to be more of a healthcare facility, but the intent is that when somebody's brought in, there's a quick assessment made, and they either go here or they're taken into a housing unit. And this facility, the number of beds is still in flux, but right now we're shooting for, I believe, 80 beds. And then just kind of an aerial view so you know, get more context and get a sense of scale. So on the lower left-hand corner is a big white box, which is the lock supply facility that's at the southeast corner of that property. Of course, you can see Oklahoma City down in the background. And then I think these are helpful. These are elevations, but just to give you a sense of scale for how big this building is. And then a couple of sections cut, which I know it's difficult to see, but again, it gives you a little sense of scale. And then just some more information and more detail about the materials. Have really been trying to emphasize, you know, and I think it's for those of us who have been around architecture and building buildings in Oklahoma, you know, it's always a difficult thing to answer, you know, what is an Oklahoma style of architecture? But I think the team has done a really good job of doing something that is respectful and it fits our city and it feels like it belongs here. And then just some more information on the different areas that are in the space program, just a little bit of a written description about what happens in each one of those spaces. And that's where we're at. A lot of work has gone into this. Really proud of the team. Proud of the jail team that's been working with us and the county team as well. So anyway, I'll open it up for more questions if you have any.
So I just want to make a couple of comments. The courtyards, you gave us 3 options for some of those courtyards for the design. How are we going to make sure that we have maintenance access to those spaces? Because they are courtyards surrounded by buildings.
So there is just the one central courtyard. And part of the reason for that was We do have such a big footprint. We want to make sure that every housing unit has direct sunlight into their outdoor rec areas, which then goes into the day rooms. And so, but yes, to answer your question, we're not going to do anything in those spaces that's going to require lawn mowing or anything like that. It's all going to be,
I noticed there's turf and
yeah.
some
Yeah.
trees.
Yeah.
I also noticed you had some windows in some of the cells. What kind of a, given our past experience
So
with
there
glass
should,
block-
there should be no windows in any of the cells.
Okay. Maybe I looked
So,
at the wrong rendering. There's a person inside. There were
yeah.
2 windows in that cell.
There shouldn't be. So basically the way it's going to work is all of the cells will be in an L shape around the day room, and then that day room opens up onto that outdoor rec area. There's a big glass wall, and then natural light comes into that. So you can, I think probably what you were seeing is
Behavioral maybe?
the behavioral, but also one of the things that we've talked a lot about in our work sessions is how many windows or borrowed lights do we have on the inside from the day room into the cell. I think it's a trade-off. So we're providing the residents less privacy, but we're also making anything that's happening in there, whether there's a health issue or something else, more visible, but also allowing for more natural light to get into those cells. So those are still some things that are in process and haven't been fully determined yet. So.
Perfect. Also, just one last comment. There are 2 pump jacks on the south side of the site.
Yes.
Are we going to do anything to put some greenery or something to block that view? Because that's
Yeah.
one of your alternate entrances
Right.
to the behavioral center.
Yeah, the plan is to make sure that we screen that somehow, some way. Again, it's very early in the landscape design, but we've had a lot of discussion about just that area of the site, and also because it's near the behavioral care center. Just as an example, that facility itself is a large facility, and so there's just so much detail thought that goes into that. So one of the things that we were thinking about is, there are some units or beds that are on the front of the building, and so we want to make sure that we're screening those windows, because we want to have windows, but they're right there by that main entrance. So screening them from cars and things at night, things that might be triggering or difficult for some of the residents there. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just one other quick comment. I've seen lots of schematic designs in my day, and this is incredibly informative and complete. I was very impressed. You were right to be proud of the team. They've done a good job.
They really have, and I will say the team meets sometimes more than once a week, but we meet every week. We go through discipline by discipline. And usually it's followed up with it's architectural and engineering first, the first half, and then contractor second half. So the team really is working well together. So, anything else, Ms. Davis? Okay. Thank you, guys.
Okay, Stacy, what's next?
Well, since I know you guys looked at all 500 sheets over the weekend, well, there was 2 other attachments. Maybe you could make a recommendation to the commissioners if you like the schematic design, if you like the concept, the reasons they designed it the way they did, for the next all 3 items, item 3, 4, and 5. Or if you don't like something, say it, let us know. Or if you're really not prepared to do that today, you want more time to look at it, we can do it at a different time. But to put the finishing touches on this so we can move on to the next phase, the county commissioners certainly need to say thumbs up or thumbs down before we go on to design development. So it's whatever your pleasure is as a board.
Just speaking personally, without having had the cost discussion, I think it would be very difficult for me to.
Oh, okay,
make
we
any
can
kind
do
of
that and then come
recommendation.
back. That's all right. Then what is it? 6 or 7 is the 7. Let's go to 7. All right, I'm gonna call Flintco up to discuss what they've been doing and how they arrived at what they did. But what I laid on in front of you guys earlier today was the construction cost index that happened in 2020, 21, 22. You have that sheet in front of you that kind of explains how the cost of these projects and probably every other project in that time frame is totally out of budget. We're not the only one. I also gave you Flintco's overall spreadsheet that breaks down the behavioral care piece, which, good news, it's fully funded. We have enough money to build that. So wouldn't be a lot of discussion on that one maybe, but where we're shorts on the detention side when you look at that number. And then I gave you a little spreadsheet that I had put together myself that kind of shows you if you reduce your bed counts, of course, that reduces construction cost, but we're we're still kind of underwater in any scenario. And then how many beds you could actually expect to see if we just went to construction with the money we have today, which is a very low number that's I don't think is going to work, but we want to hear what you think about it. So if you got any questions for me, or otherwise I'll turn it over to Flintco.
Thank you. I'm Josh Patterson with Flintco. Kurt Mammon here as well with me. So we've been putting this budget together here over the last 6 weeks or so in conjunction with HOK and the county. Currently, high level. So this is based on HOK's SD1 drawings, SD2 drawings or schematics, and then as well as the program. This is based off of it's 832,000 square feet facility between the detention and the behavioral health. Like Prue talked about 23, 28 beds. That's the detention beds is 2,248 beds. The behavioral care center has 80 beds. That's with a breakdown of in the detention, there's 624 men's beds, 1,624 men beds, 624 women's beds, and then it's 40 and 40 right now in the behavioral care center. So the detention cost is broke out with it's 677,260,784 with a cost per square foot of $887.53, and then the behavioral care center currently at 69,588 square feet with an overall cost of $47,891,351, and that's at a unit or square foot cost of $688.21. We had, we've taken into, we've spent the last, several weeks. We meet with the architectural engineering team, try to understand the scope and the vision. We've spent this last week really, we said discipline, estimate sides aside to just review our assumptions into the design, make sure those were appropriate or not, make corrections, just so that we're all at least thinking about the same facility and scope as we make some of these major assumptions for the project. We do have, we've included in here, we talked about escalation contingency. We've got, these numbers. We've tried to base them on, starting the project in, quarter, 2 to 3 of 2025. This is on the detention center, with having that, 36-month construction time frame. the BCC is we've based on starting in, sometime in Q1 of 2025, with about a 23-month schedule to make sure that facility's opened up by the end of 2026. And then we've added some some escalation cost in this budget, to try to at least have some coverage there for anything that the world may do to us. But and then we've got, we're really early in this budgeting stage. We're carrying a budget contingency there to try to identify the things that just really haven't come to development yet in the drawings as we continue to move forward. And so that's big picture. The estimate that you guys are looking at, we've got this broken down by division under our major CSI construction elements. And this is we've right now our estimates based on a precast cells cast on site. We've got quite a bit of precast throughout the building that makes these pods with steel joists for the roof to create the roof structure. Like we talked about, it's got the central utility plant that will have the major utilities there that get distributed through the building for HVAC and so forth. So, and then really we've talked about, we've kind of based all this pricing off of our historical data from other facilities. We've tried to quantify and count and take off all the parts and pieces that we can at this point, and base those off of current market pricing that we're seeing. We've getting trade partner input of what they're seeing in the market, what costs are going for right now, and then as well as bouncing these costs back and forth with the engineering team, architectural team, just to make sure that nobody's really seeing anything that's inappropriate or anything. So that's really that's kind of where we're at to date with the budget. Y'all have any questions right now?
I have a couple of comments. So one of the reasons we chose to go with a construction management delivery is to fully leverage the teaming opportunity between the contractor and the designer. Obviously, we've busted our budget considerably. What steps are you taking to provide any sort of value engineering opportunities as far as structural, finishes, anything else that can help bring that cost down? I know it's a huge gap to fill and we're going to have to fund it, but I want to make sure that we leverage this delivery system to its maximum opportunity so that the county benefits from those savings. I understand you guys are working together on that, but I cannot emphasize how important this process needs to be for the final estimate of the project, because anything that we can do in the way of design assist with our vendors, MEP especially, those are always the big ticket items. We need to find some opportunities for savings, and we need to do that fairly fast if we're able to come up with a number that is going to be the target number to hit, and we're able to get the funding that we need.
Yeah, and I think we've started a little bit of those discussions. This effort was mainly based around, hey, this is as the design team's gone through, and here's the needs and the wants and everything, and this is the price that reflects that. And but we've started some of those discussions, as we were looking at a little bit of the behavioral care center. Currently, those that mechanical system's fed off of the central utility plant. We've looked at, that's a long ways from the central utility plant. If we isolate that building, have it have its own HVAC system. There's some savings there with, we're not running, thousands of feet of pipe to feed it. So plus just with the funding sources, there's some other things that make sense there as well. So those discussions have started coming. I think, initially, I think obviously the big needle mover is going to be the bed count and getting that to, what everybody feels appropriate. And then, once we kind of get that square footage, and that's, some of the things, Farouk and the design team, as they really get into that design development stage, will start, the designs, to a certain extent blocky at this point. And I think they'll hone in on the design to get that efficiency and the square footage, which at this point, the square footage cost is going to drive the big piece of the price. And then as that gets whittled down, then we can really start analyzing some of the finishes, the types of, roof materials, the type of equipment, so that we can, really get the best, dollar for everybody.
And I also understand that this is not just a quote-unquote warehousing facility. We're including a lot of programming to have different outcomes at the end. But I just want to make sure that we're very cognizant that cost is going to be a big driver for us. So I
Right.
appreciate your efforts and, happy to help in any way possible to make sure that we're looking at every nook and cranny, make sure we find every penny we can. Actually, dollar, not penny.
So just is there any other questions? Just to tag on to what you were saying, Javier. I mean, I applaud the effort. And the delivery method is the right one, in my opinion, because it's going to bring that value. And I think the process will work moving forward from here. The key is, this is, like Josh said, this is, hey, everyone's met together. This is what we would like to have if we can. So this is the all-in kind of biggest dream, if you will. And now it's time to tighten that up, right? So the way we do that is providing options, number one, but two, finding out what's critical or sacred that can't be touched. And then we focus on the other things. And to your point, I think it's timing is always very critical in our business. I tell people this all the time. Anytime you've contemplated a budget before 2020, quarter one of 2020, and we're going to deliver it after that, it's just a legacy challenge we all face. But I think we'll get there together and determine what exactly is that right bed count, what funding sources are available. We don't want to assume that we're just going to magically come up with another X amount of $1 billion. It's our job to make sure it's critical to the project and it meets the program requirements. And that's the next steps.
Any other questions at this time?
Questions from the public? Stacy, what's next?
Thank you.
Thank you.
You let them off too easy. I'm gonna have to be hard on them next week. Well, just want to point out to you the sheet I put in front of you, which was the last spreadsheet. You talked about 1,800 bed count, which was something from the past, or it was the low end of what they were looking at when the HOK first hired. That gives you an effective count of 1,530 beds, and you're still about 390 million short of being able to fund an 1,800 bed situation. So reducing the bed count is going to help, but it's not going to get you there. Bottom line, you're not going to be able to squeeze this thing back into a budget. We're going to have to find more of a funding resource, but we should squeeze it as much as we can, and we will when we get into design development.
Stacy, you said behavioral health center is currently funded via.
Yeah, I think I've got a budget there of about 49 million that's ARPA funds. So that ARPA fund will cover the cost of that behavioral health as it sits there today. And there's talk about 60 beds or 80 beds. What you saw priced is 80 beds. So we've got, I feel real comfortable if we go to 60 beds. If we stay at 80 beds, we got some room, but still a challenge.
My question has to do with the timing of the ARPA money. Is it captured in a space and time limitation?
Oh, definitely, there's a time
So-
limit. So they need to start, they said the quarter 1 of 25 in order to finish the construction. That means plans have to be delivered probably this fall so we can get into a guaranteed maximum price with them on that piece. And so from today until this fall, that's how much design time you got left to get from schematic design through design development to construction drawings. And that window's getting very tight to where decisions are going to have to be made or we will run out of time.
And we will lose those funds. Is that correct?
At some point, you will lose those funds.
Okay.
And then have to pick, if you still want that center, you'll have to pick those up with local funds.
Stacy, I'm sorry, were you
No,
done,
go
Joanne?
ahead. No, I can come back.
Stacy, I mean, obviously the ARPA money is the money that has the shortest time frame.
Correct.
Is it possible to do the behavioral center, start it separately, start it before the rest of the building, and complete it in a timely way?
Yeah, that was their plan. They were going to start at quarter 1 and they weren't going to start the other detention. I think you said quarter 3 of
Okay.
25.
So it would, and which means that separate mechanical system might make a whole lot more sense. Okay. Thank you.
I don't know if this is the right time to ask this question, but I just kind of want to ask it out loud. We're under a DOD oversight, right? DOJ oversight.
Yeah, since 2008, we're under an MOU with the Department of Justice.
And when and at what point in time, if we haven't moved to a certain extent, will that oversight impact us?
Nobody can really say for sure what they will or won't do. What I've researched a few places around the country, it's usually around year 20, maybe
And where are we now?
year 16.
So we're kind of running out of time.
Absolutely, because they start before you're 20. I mean, you're 20 years is what you have, but they'll start year 16, 17 to look into what's going on.
So I'm just trying to make the point that decisions have to be made expeditiously one way or the other.
Yeah, I would hope that we as Oklahomans can take care of this problem and do it our way rather than having to have Washington, D.C. come here and do it their way.
Okay. And when they've done it their way, what happens? Do you know that from research?
Not in enough detail to answer your question, but I think what I'd answer that is we'll do better than they will in controlling the price, the quality, all of it.
Okay, so I guess maybe I need to say it. So if they come in and do what they want to do, they'll do it where they want to do it. They'll build it how they want to build it. And then they'll leave us with the bill. Am I speaking correctly?
Yeah, it seems like
That
there's
is
a
my
consensus.
that is my understanding. And regrettably, the only response the county would have would be to find some way to raise taxes, because you only have a period of 3 or 4 years to repay that invoice, quote unquote, from the feds. The most feasible opportunity I see is ad valorem taxes, which would kill our economy.
Thank you.
So you need an approval for the schematic design to get to the next level?
Yes, I eventually want that. If I can get it today, great. If you're not comfortable, we'll have another meeting and when you are comfortable.
So I
Yeah.
think we're early enough in the design process that we need to continue to take the steps going forward. You know, I look at this as a big spiral. We're eventually going to get to the bullseye. but this is part of the process. We're taking a big picture look. We'll narrow down the cost and the design elements that get us to that lower cost. But I'm perfectly fine going forward with the schematic design.
So I think I have my perspective on what's been presented, especially understanding the cost concerns and the implications, and thinking about how fast process can move forward. Is I'm concerned we kind of maxed out all of the sort of options. So we're starting, but then we, particularly given the conversations about this site. So I think this site provided flexibility for being able to moderate how big, how large, how fast you needed to move on some of the things. So I understand what Javier's saying about, like, we get the opportunity. I mean, we still have the opportunity to sort of work on some of these things. I guess I'm concerned with starting from the outside, and then I guess I don't exactly understand the difference between starting at 20, I think 400 beds, kind of what's on the program, and then having the space for future expansion. It sounds like we started out expanding from where we were already. So that's my, and I don't want to throw sort of monkey wrenches at the process, but I do have a little bit of concern. I mean, I'd almost rather us option the additions all the way up to however much capacity the site could hold. So we're considering all of that today, but I'd rather get to sort of the minimally viable scale of the building that we need, so that we're kind of talking from, I mean, the swing of a couple of $100 million is not insignificant. So we're kind of talking from, this is kind of where things need to be. And then if the winds are blowing in the right way, we feel like there are other venues or opportunities for additional revenue and things. I mean, you can build to as much of a jail as is feasible, but I'd prefer to start with sort of the minimally viable, and work our way up as additions on the options, versus starting with what feels like the outside of the viable options, and then we're gonna kind of maybe work our way down. A lot of that for me is the services, the quality of construction, what it looks like will be important. And I've been through the VE process, and I don't want us to be fighting beds versus daylight, for example, or beds versus ease of amenities for staff that we know is going to be really critical to keeping them engaged in this facility. So that's my commentary. That's probably my biggest challenge.
And I have a similar concern to Sandino. I would have no issue today approving design for the behavioral facility with the understanding that it would have its own standalone mechanical system so that it can be completed independently of the detention facility. But I have a real problem approving a design for a building that we know we can't afford. And unless and until we know how much money we have available, kind of to Sandino's point, I'd like to design to a more realistic number. I mean, I come from a background where design to the budget is a big mandate, and that's kind of where I'm coming from right now.
Yeah, and this is the first project I think I've been on where designing to the budget really wasn't a feasible option. If you look at the bottom line on that spreadsheet.
Yeah, and I would just to plus on what Mike was saying. I do understand these are this is a conceptual budget, so there's really probably ability to tighten, because if you're looking at this schematic design, which is kind of not even step one, it's kind of the pre-step, right? I do get that part. I think for me, I'm just looking at the order of the process, because I would echo Mike's comments. Behavioral health center seems to make sense. I understand what we're doing there. Let's move the process along. I think it just seems like we started in a weird place on the schematic design. I just get concerned about us not being able to constructively add cost and have a menu of things from a schematic that is really allowing us to produce kind of the highest quality building. Even if if the budget consideration is the thing, I'm just looking at the difference between 680 million and 600 million. I mean, it to me is not insignificant, in cost. And I just know what has to get cut when you start thinking about those things. It just feels like we're starting out sort of prioritizing the bed count, which I think is an important factor in consideration. But I think today we don't have a bed problem at 1,800. I think today we're highly invested in these diversionary sort of approaches and the services. So I think today we also got to make sure that we're going to build a building that is the highest quality, least cost to operate building, because those are all going to be things that are important for us as citizens, but also for the people who are going to have to be there and the people that are going to have to work there. And I just get concerned about starting with with a bigger sort of schematic sort of layout versus a smaller one and saying, here's how we can add to it.
And go ahead, John.
Well, that was why I was asking about the escalation factors, because the bigger you build it, the higher the cost and the higher the escalation costs are going to get through the process of construction. So then you have to make ultimately those decisions on where you do cut based on your budgetary parameters. And so I kind of agree with what Sandino is saying. So if we know historically or what we're seeing across the country that these diversionary tactics are working, I don't want to call it tactics, but they're working in reducing the number of people that are inside our jails, then why start at the maximum amount when we can find a middle ground with the idea that we have the ability to expand, which then allows us to seek more funding if that in fact is the case, if that makes sense.
And this is a question for Farouk. And it's not that hard a question. If we were to approve the schematic design as it sits today with the nearly 2,400 beds, how difficult is it to scale back to 1,800?
I don't think it's, for this type of facility, I don't think it's that difficult because it is, like Sandina mentioned, it's kind of modular in terms of the housing units and the beds.
And it wouldn't be difficult to go back the other way.
Right.
Okay. That's it. That was easy.
So one of my concerns is time. We don't have a lot of time to take advantage of the ARPA money. And phased construction, as you guys know, increases costs. So if we're already fighting a budget concern, why exacerbate that concern?
Because we don't know what the budget is.
I think we have an idea of what it should be, and I think we need to start working, not this body, it's not our job to secure the funding, but we need to be very honest and very quick with the bad news so that the appropriate folks start working on this. I think our job is to focus on construction and that process, and therefore I think we need to let them continue with the design as suggested, and I think it's a great idea to separate the two structures. But I think in order for the county to make decisions, this body needs to make its recommendations. And I think that recommendation should be that we continue with the process, we approve the schematic design as presented, and we continue to work down that path. We're not committing to a price, we're not committing to anything yet. We're just getting an idea, but this is a process that is going to be iterative, and we need to begin that process of iteration as soon as possible.
One thing to be clear on, we have to have some separation in funding and physically from the BCC to the jail. So when you think about the cannabis system, they have to be separate. We can't spend all the dollars. So the single plan has to be addressed. And it's sort of a follow-up to the question. It's going to be the support services and facility critical. That's where we have to make some get involved. How large we're going to go.
There may be two motions here. I think we all agree about behavioral health. I think on detention, the question really is 1,800 or 2,400 beds. And based on today's population, 1,800 works. And then someone might say, well, we need well, let's just do 2,400 because either way, we're short on money. But 70 million is 70 million. And for those that believe in, we have to keep making progress in who we incarcerate. 1,800 keeps pressure on us with the resources we have now. And also, kind of how I view it is, whether I have a 1-car garage or a 2-car garage, it's going to be full of stuff. And I believe if we only build the 1-car garage with 1,800 beds, we're going to figure out how to make it work. If we have a 2,400 bed garage, there's an opportunity to fill it.
Yeah. Or we'll make the case that we need to add a garage, right? And I think either way for me is just I mean I came onto this this board because I wanted to make sure that we influence the best possible that we could deliver a really high quality detention facility, both for the people who would be housed there and for the folks who work there. I just get concerned when we start with the larger number, and I do understand the means for it, so I don't want to take it off the table at all. I just get concerned starting there and with the process because I think we're going to be fighting. We're starting out fighting bed count versus quality. I mean, because when we start VEing, we're not gonna figure it. We're not gonna find like we're not gonna sprinkle fairy dust on the things and make the cost go down. Like we're gonna cut things out to make things cheaper. So that's my concern. I mean, 1,800 beds seems like I want to be responsive to the concerns. I think Steve said it very well, but it's just process wise. I'm 100% on board with where we are, but I just get concerned about starting there.
So I think I agree with the concerns. The challenge is we're going to have one opportunity to seek additional funding. I'm not sure if you guys keep up with this, but jails are not the most popular votes for anybody in any community. So saying that we're going to face it and we're going to go with 1,800 beds now and later we go to 2,400 is not real. Given our political climate, we've been very successful with the metropolitan area projects because everybody gets to enjoy them, right? Hopefully, nobody gets to enjoy a new county jail. That's the logic. They're not going to vote for something they cannot enjoy, especially twice. And the criminal pendulum, goes back and forth. We're in an upswing again. So if we build small, what then? And how do we get additional money? That's a very real concern. I've seen this movie before. It's not pretty. We had troubles getting this funding issued. So why exacerbate that problem by trying to build something smaller? And if we wind up spending less money than what has been projected, that's great for the county. However, if we face it, we're spending more money. And, I've been in construction 30 some odd years. There's a right way to do the most hated word I have is value engineering because Sandino's right. Usually quality suffers. But I think that's one of the reasons why we chose Flintco and the HOK Reese team to work together to come up with the best solutions that are conscientious of quality and the finished product. And one of the reasons I've felt very strongly about working with Flintco is that they're going to roll up their sleeves and work with us as a team to get to the right number. And so I do not want to delay the commissioners any further than we need to as we go down this path. And that would be my very strong feeling.
And Farouk, I think what you're learning here today, it would have helped if we had a stronger presentation about why 2,248 beds rather than kind of just cuz. Would have been helpful. Because we're kind of swimming here of, well, we're hearing we talked to the staff, and just cuz we need 2,248. Versus if you take the 1,300 and apply a multiplier to it, you get to a number.
I think there have been a number of conversations to that end. I know my commissioner's been very involved in those conversations. And he actually had a higher number in mind, but I think we came to an agreement with the 2383 or whatever the number is. So I think we would like to see that information, the process that helped you arrive at that count.
Well, many people were consulted. I don't know who all they met with. They met with a lot of people. And I think from my perspective, the count full column is what they were really looking at. Because that's when you're full. And then the count is what it is. So that's where that count full is an operational number. And that's the numbers they're really looking at on
So
this
one more
spreadsheet.
question for Farouk. Sorry to keep putting you on the spot. When do you have to know, in order to maintain the schedule that Flintco has provided and that you and Flintco have worked on together, when do you have to know how many beds we're going to have? Now, for those of you who didn't hear, that answer was last week.
We can certainly provide more backup on why we arrived at the bed number, but again, we've got historical data. We're looking at daily census every almost weekly as we tackle the program process.
What that really means is we need to know how much money we have last week.
And, again, just to respond to those discussions about or collaboration and creativity on, we don't want to sacrifice the quality and functionality, meaning we don't want. However, we got to think about how different systems, different ways to get to the same goal. And those are sometimes more complex questions. When we talk about different systems, we may not have to. There was a lot of discussion about built up and precast versus concrete block. There's just not enough. I think there was a comment made in one of the work sessions. There's not enough space instead of the home. So it's building that state. So those are the kinds of conversations we're having.
And I do want to say I commend you guys on the design. I didn't see any round wall or any odd shape other than square. I love that because that's the most efficient. Thank you, guys. Function over form.
But we had some. We cut them out.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say, yeah, I think that the design actually is really high quality. I think thinking about the role of this board and realizing that, I mean, ultimately this is something that needs to go to the county commissioners. I think given the timeline you stated, I'm 100% on board with moving an item forward. I still, I guess I just feel like I know that I'm probably not going to support an endorsement of the schematic with no commentary on the bed size. Because I mean, I think if the county commissioners if they want to build a 4,000 bed jail, they absolutely can. And if they produce the resources, then we absolutely will execute that to the best of our abilities. And I'm speaking for myself, but the resources are going to be required, right? And so for me, the information we know today, I don't feel like I'm in a position to sort of move those things forward. I think I would be interested in moving on the schematic design, a schematic design that was based more on the 1,800 bed count number, and that showed the options to expand from there. And then if they want to take that and place whatever number they want and come and sort of make the case for the overall budget amount, because the dollars are, I mean, we know what the dollars are, then that would make sense. I'm just really thinking about the process of moving the schematic design forward. And for me, I just don't want to start with it being at 2,400 beds.
So I'm gonna make a motion that gets the process at least started. I think there is agreement that, and we'll find out when we vote, about approving the schematic design for the behavioral facility with the caveat that it be a standalone facility. So I'm going to make that motion right now.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion? Public comment? Cassie, let's vote, please.
Yes.
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 Okay, what do we want to do with detention?
Well, there's Naja. I guess I'm going where Sandino went, except I get concerned with going for that amount, and then with escalation factors growing in terms of construction costs, are we going to be able to get there with the funds we have?
Yeah. Well, and so I think for me, the reason this is it's a bit mute because I do agree with Javier. Like, I mean, it's not our job actually to figure out the dollars. It is our job, I think, to understand what the dollars will allow us to put into place, right? Will allow us to execute on. So for me, this is more about process because I think even if we approve the schematic, I mean, we still have to we're sending those things to the county commissioners to really start talking about, okay, how much money is available to fill the gap. So whether that's additional bond, I mean, there's all the strategies, right, that they would have to look at, which is not our purview. I just don't want to start. I mean, we've started with a facility that has, almost 2,400 beds, so more than, I mean, anything that's kind of on our little spreadsheet of counts here, actually. And then we're still talking about future expansion. I mean, for me, I don't understand. It doesn't feel like we've sort of arrived at the number. And if they know better, or if they are sort of more informed about this process, I mean, they ultimately decided. So that part I'm fine with. I don't want to send something that starts on the back end of the numbers because I don't know enough about the dollar amounts. And what I do know personally suggests that we're outpunting the coverage. So I'd rather I'd rather approve or recommend a schematic that's not outpunting the coverage, and this based on just my professional sort of insight or perspective. Feels like 2,400 beds, we're outpunting the coverage. If we can raise $700 million or whatever, or the $460 million, and it's that easy, I mean, so be it, right? But I just think it introduces a bunch of other questions. That's why I want to change the process.
Sandy, and I think, one of the things that's hard, and this hopefully, responds to some of Steve's questions too about, just the numbers and the process. Really what you have is you have historical data. And, and like Javier said, I heard this morning that there's discussion about 780. That could have a huge impact on the bill. And so I think, we have to make some judgment calls with respect to the number of beds. And then I think, there's that 15% factor that you say, you're full of, plus 15%. And I do want to clarify that those expansion beds, I think it's best practice, no matter what kind of building you're building, to know that you can expand that facility. Historically, what we've seen, and I don't remember off the top of my head what that period of time is, but it's a long time. Kind of like you said, you're going to get to do this one probably in a hell. And so, can it expand? Yes. Are we planning for it to expand? That's future generations to decide.
Yeah, no. I just want to clarify. So what I'm suggesting, because I get all of that, but what I'm suggesting is just that the recommendation that moves forward with all of the unknown variables for me, we've started at a higher threshold than what I'm just personally comfortable with. So that's what I'm saying. So a schematic that showed options that started from, again, 1,800 kind of makes sense to me. A schematic that started there and said, here's what the costs look like to add and go, knowing that we're going to have to add, is more palatable because it feels like we're actually centering the conversation in the right way. It might actually have the same end result, But it's important to me that we have the right kind of conversation about the size and of the jail and the cost. That's what I'm saying.
And I would suggest, I think we have three options here. No action. Come back to us next month with this input. We approve the schematic at 2248 beds. We approve a schematic which would be the same at 1,800 beds. I think those are our three options.
So what is the impact of our lack of approval today?
Well, it will delay the turning them loose on design development, which I really can't afford to lose 30 days there.
Will design development continue since you don't have a site that you own yet, or are you going to be delayed anyway?
We were planning on moving forward with design development based on what you said here today.
Thank you.
I'm not a fan of delay either. So.
Well, I think we can hold our hands here, try to take some action, and we're moving for approval of the design as presented at schematic level, and we go forward.
There's a reluctant second. And I'll make some comments. I came in here today not thinking that I would want to approve a schematic design for 2,400 beds. But as I sit here and think about it, I mean, the commissioners have right now an incredibly difficult challenge in front of them. And that's to figure out how many additional dollars can be raised for this facility, and that is what's going to determine the number of beds. I would vote in favor of the schematic to keep the process going, knowing that we can scale it back if the commissioners come back to us and tell us we can afford, we will have funding for, and Sandino, your number and my number, the number I've had in my head all along has been 1,800 because of the earlier study. But I think it might be easier to do that and scale back than to start at the 1,800. And if the commissioners believe they need more beds and can raise the money, then to drop back and then go back again to a higher number. I don't like this, but once again, I understand that the commissioners are in a really, really tough position, but it's the money that's going to drive the beds.
Is there other discussion? I have a piece of discussion, and I respect our process, and this motion may pass. I plan to vote no. In that, I'd rather start at 1,800 and scale up. It's my understanding the voters were told 2 years ago 1,800 beds. And other than just cause, I haven't heard why we need this many beds, but I will support the process. Other discussion?
Same here. I'm of the mind if you build it, they'll come, and I don't want any more coming to the jail than need to come. So that's kind of where I'm going, except for the fact that I think 1,800 is we've done the analysis, and 1,800 is the number.
Is there other discussion? Cassie, let's vote, please. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Nope.
Yes.
No.
No. Is there another motion or discussion?
Yeah. I would move to approve the schematic based on, to approve a schematic that has 1,800 beds as a, let me say more or less, 1,800 beds more or less as a basis.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Yes. I think it's a lot easier to ask for more money now in a higher count than go back a second time and take the number up and the budget up.
Yeah, and I think that we have, so as if I understand the process correctly, I mean, we have the numbers. So I think all this data goes. I mean, I'm looking at I'm gonna dub it as Stacy's spreadsheet here that tells me like a lot of what I need to know. Um, I mean, I think looking at these things as options absolutely would be what I would anticipate. And I think if the county commissioners want to endorse higher numbers than 1,800, and that's the campaign, I'm 100% on board with it. 100% on board with it. So I hopefully am not precluding Farouk or any of the other folks on the design side from being able to get that accomplished.
And I think if this motion were to pass, we're respectful of what the commissioners decide. And then if the desire, Stacy, is to have us look at a higher bed count, if this motion passes, we're here next month. Further discussion? May we have a vote, please, Cassie?
No.
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you. That was tough. Thank you, everyone. What else is on our agenda, Stacy? Okay. Thank you.
Did we not need to take any action on Flico's presentation? Okay. And I don't know. I knew we jumped around because we wanted to have both sides of that conversation, but so I'm just asking. Yeah.
Is that your motion?
I would move to accept Flinco's very in-depth presentation on the numbers.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion? Public comment? Stacy, vote, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. Anything else, Stacy? Is there citizen participation? Board comments? Stacy comments?
Transportation plan.
Oh, yes. All right. Any new business? And Stacy, you guys are working hard on a very difficult project. Thank you. What's next, Cassie? Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Anything else, Cassie? Thanks, everyone. Okay. Yes.
Aye.
Yep.